Yes. Yes.
Great. I promise I'm not standing in the vestibule of some very hip restaurant, unfortunately. I am in my car outside of an event in support of our immigrant and refugee community. So I apologize again for the poor lighting, but thank you so much for having me tonight. My name is Hetal Doshi, and I am running to serve as your next Attorney General. About a year ago, I started to hear questions around the administration that inspired this idea for a podcast. I ended up not starting the podcast, did end up running for office, but I share this question for you because it is the anchor as to my why for why I'm running. The question was, wait, can they do that? In this moment, we are seeing an all-out assault, as numbers of folks here tonight have talked about, from people who have power and resources, both inside the government and outside the government, on our way of life, on our rights, our bodies, our norms, and our traditions. And so I am running to serve as Colorado's next Attorney General, to serve as the tip of the spear, to serve as your lawyer to fight back. I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a 20-year practicing lawyer, and I've spent the majority of that 20 years of practice at the Department of Justice doing work like public corruption prosecution, which historically has prevented me from being in deeply partisan spaces or in rooms like the one that you were in tonight. But all of that changed a year ago when I resigned my position at the Justice Department. I'm a first generation American and the proud daughter of two immigrants. And I moved around a lot as a kid, but primarily grew up as a proud product of public education in Alabama, where I grew up 80 miles from Selma and the Edmund Pettus Bridge. As you might imagine, growing up in the cradle of the civil rights movement, particularly as a first generation American, deeply transformed my sense of values and brought me to a love of the law. That is why I went to law school. I come by being a champion for working families and for families like mine because that fight is deeply personal. I suppose you might say I was a born fighter because, as many immigrant children and other children do in working class families, I started negotiating power bills and medical bills for my family in elementary school. And that inspired a deep distrust for the types of ways that power and money can exploit and abuse working families and working people like my own. And so that's why I went to law school, and I understand to the question of, wait, can they do that? The law is a tool and government is a tool for fighting back and doing good. I got the opportunity of a lifetime more than 11 years ago when I became a federal prosecutor here in Colorado. And while that sounds like DC work, in fact, my federal prosecution experience here in Colorado took me to the four corners of the state where I prosecuted scammers, corrupt public officials, executives who crashed our economy in 2008, and other types of cases. And I recovered billions of dollars for the American people and for the state of Colorado in the form of consumer relief and tens of millions of dollars for housing relief, which we've spent a lot of time talking about tonight. At the beginning of the Biden-Harris administration, I got the opportunity of a lifetime where the Biden-Harris administration reached out to me to say, we would love for you to come lead a transformative era of consumer protection and antitrust enforcement and serve as the Deputy Assistant Attorney General representing and managing 800 people in a $250 million budget to take on cases like Google, Apple, Ticketmaster, and the corporate landlords that use algorithms to jack up our rent. And I did so. It was a great privilege and an honor to represent the people of the United States and the people of Colorado in those fights. And I didn't just pick those fights, as you probably saw headline after headline during the Biden-Harris administration. We won those fights. And so I share that with you to say that in this moment, when you're selecting your lawyer as Attorney General, it's important to make sure that that lawyer not only has the fight and the passion for the fight, but also the tools to win that fight. I think that the next Attorney General has to, number one, hold the line on democracy and defend Colorado, but that's table stakes, right? Every candidate can and will and should be saying that to you. The one thing that I will share with you is that I am the only candidate in this race with the federal experience to understand where the bodies are buried in the federal government and how to fight the federal government and win. The other piece of this is, of course, how do we address the circumstances that led to Donald Trump? And that is a place where I think that the law and all of the work that I have done in fighting mergers and blocking mergers and making sure that big corporations that abuse and cheat and violate the laws are held accountable, that's all necessary to make sure that all of the things that we are talking about here tonight, to make sure that families can afford housing, food, and healthcare is possible. And the last thing I will say is that, look, this fight is deeply personal for me. We haven't even talked, or I haven't even even talked about ICE being militarized in the way they are to shoot Americans, and the administration trying to redefine what it means to be an American and a patriot in a way that excludes me and my service. But you better believe that that motivates me every single morning to take on this fight. And so I've never run for office before. I've never wanted to, but I feel called in this moment to be your lawyer, and I would be honored, and it would be the privilege of a lifetime to have your support. Thank you so much.